In the last movie, we installed Ruby Gems, which is the package manager for Ruby libraries. And I told you at the time that Ruby on Rails is actually a Ruby gem. So because we have the Ruby Gems package manager installed, it's going to make it really simple for us to install and manage different versions of Ruby on Rails. Start by going into your terminal application. Now the first gem that we're going to install actually won't be Rails. We're going to start by installing something called Bundler. Bundler is a tool that helps your Rails application to load the right Ruby gems. Imagine for a moment that we have more than one Ruby on Rails application on our computer. The first application might be older and want to use version 1 of a particular gem, while another more up-to-date Ruby on Rails application might want to use the newer version 2 of the gem. And many gems require other gems to function, and those have different versions too. Back in Rails version 2, keeping all of these gem versions straight and making sure the correct ones were loaded became a big headache. So Bundler was added in Rails 3 to manage the gems that each application needs. It keeps track for us and makes sure that each gem gets loaded when it needs to be loaded. You can install Bundler from the command line by typing gem install bundler. That command will tell the Ruby Gems package manager to go to the Ruby Gems website, to look for the latest version of Bundler, to download it, and then install it. And you'll see it comes up and says 1 gem installed at the end. Bundler allows us to run commands from the command line too, so you can type bundle and then something after it. We'll do that in just a moment, but remember that if you're using rbinv like I am, then you need to type rehash whenever there's something that's going to have a command line command that needs to be available. Now bundle space -v, notice that it's bundle, not bundler, the R is missing when it's a command. It will come back and tell me the version of bundler that I have. And if I say which bundle, it'll tell me where it's located, and you can see that it's located in that rbinv folder. The rehash command is what put it there. Now that we have Bundler installed, we're ready to install Ruby on Rails. I'll just clear my screen with Command K. Now to install Rails is simple, just type gem install Rails, but before we hit return, there are a couple of options that we can provide here. You may have noticed when it installed Bundler that it also installed some documentation. So whenever we install Ruby Gems, it's going to want to install that documentation as well. That documentation just sits quietly on our hard drive, taking up space, and almost no one ever refers to it. And for Rails, that documentation is quite extensive. So we can skip the download and processing of that documentation by passing in the --no-ri space --no-rdoc, and it will not generate either the RI or RDoc documentation for this. It speeds up the installation process, and it doesn't take up space on your hard drive with documentation that you're never going to look at. Now, once again, we could hit return here and it would go out and find the latest version of Ruby on Rails and install that for us. But we may not want the latest version. It depends on when you're watching this training. So let's also learn what the current version is and see how we can specify it. If you go to Firefox and go to rubygems.org, and you can search for Rails, and you'll bring up the Rails gem. We can click on this to find out more information. It tells us the current version right now is 4.0.0, and that probably will change by the time that you're watching this. And if we scroll down, you can see that it lists all the versions here, and we can even click a link here to see all the past versions all the way back in time. So you want to pick the newest version that will still work with this training. Now this training will work with all versions of Rails 4. If we get to version 5 of Rails, it may still work. But if you need to specify, if you need to go back and pick a previous version, let's say the latest version of 4 that's offered, then you can specify that by typing --version, and then a space, and then the version number that you want. Now again, you may not need to do that. You may be able to have it install the latest version, but I want you to see that you can specify it if you need to. So you don't necessarily need to install the exact same version that I did. It will take a little while to install everything. When we're done, once again, we'll want to be able to run the Rails command from the command line, so we're going to want to type rbinv and then rehash again. Now we can type Rails-V to see the version of Rails that we have installed, and which Rails will show us that it added that shim to the rbinv folder. So we type gem list, and we'll see a list of all of the different gems that it installed. You can see that Rails has lots of dependencies, other gems that it depends on. If you go up here, you'll notice that these are the core part of Ruby on Rails here. We talked about some of these before, Action Pack and Active Record, for example. You won't need to deal with these gems directly. You'll just work with Rails, and Rails will call on these gems when they're needed. Now that we have Ruby on Rails installed, we're getting close to having all the parts that we need to get started, but we still need a database to store data. Next, let's see how to install MySQL.